You will never become rich unless you understand how the system truly works, and in this video we're going to uncover all of that stuff. We're going to look at why what most people do to get rich is the absolute opposite of what's required, and then we're going to look at the actual solution to the problem. If you like this sort of content, don't forget to subscribe as we make videos like this every single day, and let's jump into this video. So we're going to first outline what the problem is, and this goes into the concept of get rich quick. Life is a long battle, but whilst we are on this long path, a lot of it is struggle. And who wants to go through that? It's hard work, and most of us know what it feels like to be broke at some point. It's not fun, so why would anybody want to do this? And for that reason, everybody wants to get rich quick. But this is one of the biggest problems holding people back from ever getting rich. You see, a lot of the content on YouTube is focused around getting rich extremely fast, and the problem with this is that it doesn't really create a good money mindset. Just look at people who actually do get rich fast and look at what happens to them. Look at professional athletes like basketball and football players. Look at people who win the lottery. A lot of these people lose their money just as fast as they get it, because they don't learn true financial responsibility. If I was to give someone £1 million, and if somebody was to earn £1 million, their mindset would be completely different, because one person had to work hard for what they have and understand what it takes to get there, and the other person simply had that amount of money handed to them. And that's one of the biggest things about getting rich quick. Obviously it's the dream. Obviously it's the easiest path, but sadly it's not something that most people can achieve. And whilst that might sound like a negative approach to take, it really isn't. Think about what it does mean for us. It means that we can work on building a sustainable and long-term path which will get us rich over the course of our lives, or even in a couple of years. Nobody's saying it's impossible to build a business worth a couple £100,000, maybe even a couple million, in about 3, 4, 5 years. But when we're thinking about building things in 3, 4, 5 months and trying to get rich in that amount of time, we have just a few options. It's going to be quite difficult. And also, when we work to these extremely close time frames, things become really desperate. We need things to happen now, and that can often lead to bad decisions. As if I wanted to make a business from 0 to £1 million in 6 months, I probably don't have enough time to properly map out the business plan and go through everything properly. Whereas if I do things properly, map it out correctly, do the right things that I need to do to get my business to a sustainable long-term point, I will have a better future. And this is going to massively help me when it comes to getting rich. So one of the biggest problems that we face nowadays is people who go on the internet and will happily sell people a course telling them to become a millionaire in a couple of weeks. I will happily share with you guys some of the results that I've seen in my businesses if you've been watching the channel, but I will always say this is just my experience. It doesn't mean that everybody's going to get rich. And the idea that most people get rich in just a couple of weeks or even a couple of years is simply put nonsense. If you come at it with a more wholesome view, you will probably get better results. And I know people at this point will probably be thinking, well, getting £1 million in 5 years, 10 years seems like a lot of work. Well, let's face it, most people don't become millionaires over the course of their entire life. So to do that in 5 years, 10 years is already a pretty big achievement. Like, think about how much money that actually is. And this whole mindset of needing to do everything now leads to people simply being sucked into ideas, buying courses, and ultimately losing more and more money. The money that they could have had is even lower than what it would have been originally because they've bought an overpriced course and spent money on a business idea that simply won't work because they've not taken the time to look into what it actually is. Now, there's another reason why most people will never get rich, and that's because they don't use the money that they have correctly. Now we can tie this into the first point of trying to get everything very quickly, because whilst that point was intended to talk about the business side of things, think about it in real life. Everybody wants everything now, even if they're not in a position where they can actually afford it. Like, when I walk around the streets, I see so many new cars, I see people who have mortgages and houses, and people who have their phones on contracts. Now, I'm not saying that there's anything explicitly wrong with this, but this is some of the biggest things keeping you poor. Do you really need to upgrade your car to a model that's £200, £300, £400, £500 a month on finance or more, when you could realistically spend £1,000 or £2,000 to have a vehicle that will work? Do you really need to have a mortgage which ties you down to one location for 25, 30 years, when you could possibly rent and get cheaper deals? I'm not telling anybody what to do, but I'm just explaining how a lot of this is conditioning people to be poor. People are buying stuff on finance which they clearly can't afford, keeping them in a circle of debt. Like, instead of financing a car that's going to cost you 10 times more than a car that you can actually afford or need, If you spend that money investing into the stock market in a simple index fund or building a business and investing the money there, this could give you better results, but you want the nice stuff now. And I see this all the time in real life, and I always ask people, why is it one or the other? Because most people say, well, I could have, £10,000 and be miserable, or I could have this lovely new car and be very, very happy. And I'm like, why is it one or the other? Why can't you have both? My idea of it would be take the £10,000 in cash that you have, try build something to grow your money, double it maybe, and then you can have 10 grand in cash and you can have 10 grand in your new car. This is what rich people do, and this is ultimately why poor people are conditioned to be that way. Because they want to have stuff now, and the stuff that they don't need and stuff that they can't really afford. If you keep within your budget and set a budget, you'll get better over time. Now, I know that not everybody in the world wants to be one of the world's richest people, but if you look at the world's richest people, there's a lot that we can learn in terms of finance from them. A lot of the world's millionaires and billionaires have got backstories which involve doing hardship, going through hardship, and not having the stuff that they want immediately. This is quite a hard concept to grasp, because imagine, if you were to have a certain amount of money in cash to buy what you want, how do you hold yourself back from not buying that? It is actually quite difficult. But this is what we need to learn, and this is why we need to uncondition ourselves from the consumer society that we live in. I'm not saying that I don't buy myself nice stuff, because oftentimes I do. But what I am saying is that I understand that having everything that I want right now, even if I can afford it, might not be the best decision for me in the long term. And this is what most people will never ever understand, because we have a society that's built on consumerism, because it benefits big businesses. If you keep buying stuff that you can't afford, keep getting into debt, then finance companies make interest on your debt, and also companies make money from you buying their assets. So just think about that concept next time you're thinking about buying something. Is it something that you need, and is it something that will enhance your life? So if you don't have any money and you want to get out of being poor, what would I personally do? The first thing that I would do myself is set out a plan, and that plan would involve objectives as to what I actually wanted. I wouldn't be focusing on somebody else's dream, I'd be focusing on my genuine life goals. If I want a Ferrari, that should be on the map. If I don't want anything fancy like that, and I just want my time back, that should be on the map. So I'd be mapping out what I actually want and need. Once I've done that, I'd be thinking about how I can realistically get there. It might be through starting a business. It might be through simply saving better. It might be through investing in the stock market. It could be anything like this. And once I've got that mapped out, I will then think about how I actually get myself there. What is the vehicle that I use? Ultimately, how will I get the capital required to put me in a better position? With a business, that's pretty self-explanatory. You just need to run the business. But when it comes to things like investing in the stock market and saving, where do I get that money from? And oftentimes when we look through our bills, our expenses on a month-to-month basis, we can see some pretty big costs which are weighing us down. Costs for items that we just do not need to actually have. So how many of these could we realistically minimize from our life, and how many of these do we need? When we cut this down, we will probably have a lot of money to save, and this way we can get ourselves out of poverty. We can put ourselves into a better place, buying assets which will benefit us in the long run. And then when we zoom out to that 5-year picture and beyond, we're going to see the benefits and the rewards of our hard labour over the past couple of years. So of course I don't make a video like this to demotivate anybody. This video is actually intended to be your motivation. I understand, as many of you guys will now, that a 5-year plan isn't that long of a time period. Like, look at how long ago 5 years was in real terms. 5 years ago we were in about 2017. That doesn't seem like a long time ago at all. So when we think about it like that, do we have much time to waste? Because 5 years will be gone like that yet again. So for that reason, it's important to utilise every moment. And just remember, if you don't set out a plan for 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, 20 years, and if you don't feel comfortable with getting rich in a moderate time period, you are probably not going to get rich at all. And whilst that might sound like oh well, I'd rather try the quick route, think about it. Do you want to be rich almost guaranteed in the next 50 years? Or do you want to sit there when you're old and not have much money to your name? I'm not saying that money matters to everybody, and I'm not saying that money is the be-all and end-all to what life is about. But what I am saying is I have a channel here that's dedicated to finance and self-motivation. And what I want to do on this channel is explain, in my opinion, the easiest and best methods to unlock your best self. I think having patience and understanding what goes into building a successful life is one of the biggest things to get you there. If you explain this in different forms of life, it makes much more sense. Imagine if somebody said that they want to learn a language fluently in 2 weeks, 3 weeks. It's obviously impossible for most people. So why is the same not true for business? Business is sort of a language. Understanding life is a language of a sort. And once you understand it, you'll be in a much better place. But if you want to understand it, do it properly and do it extensively to become the best in your field. And whilst it might take a couple of weeks, a couple of months, a couple of years longer than you'd expect, it will pay off in the long run. You'll be able to sit there in a couple of years' time saying, I'm actually on the path. And thank goodness I didn't fall for this trick. If I talk about my experiences, there's been times where I have put money into this stock, that stock, because people told me it was going to go up by hundreds of %, all for me to lose money, because I thought I was going to get rich quick. Now what I've started doing is a more safe method of investing where I look at stocks which I actually think will do well over the 5 to 10 year term, and I've seen my portfolio already do quite a bit better. It's just one example of how I've seen changes based on taking things seriously. But I hope this video was actually useful to you guys, and I hope you watched it all the way till this point. Thank you so much, and I hope to see you all in our next one. Goodbye.